was smart, I would let them come to me.
The scariest serial killers aren't always the ones who make headlines while they're active. Sometimes they're the ones nobody notices until it's too late. Israel Keyes was exactly that type of killer. Someone who lived such a perfectly normal life that when the truth came out, it shocked everyone who knew him.
I've known since I was 14 that there were things that I thought were normal and that were okay that nobody else seems to think are normal and okay.
This isn't just another true crime story. It's a terrifying look at how someone can live a shocking double life in the modern world. No one knows when Israel Keyes' horrific spree started, but we know when it ended. It was in 2012 in Anchorage, Alaska, when an 18-year-old girl named Samantha Koenig met a grisly fate. She was closing up shop at the coffee stand she was working at when a man wearing a ski mask entered and ordered an Americano. Then he pulled out a firearm, pointed it at her, and told her to turn off the lights. He tied her up and drove her to his house. There he SA'd her and then took her life. He then threw her body in his shed and left on a 2-week cruise with his family in the Gulf of Mexico. When he returned from his trip, Keyes put makeup on Samantha's body, sewed her eyes open with a fishing line, and snapped a picture of a 4-day-old issue of the Anchorage Daily News alongside her body, making it look alive. He demanded $30,000 in ransom and then dismembered the body and disposed of it in the Manatuskna Lake, north of Anchorage. This was his biggest mistake yet. The police tracked withdrawals from his account and eventually arrested him in Texas on March 13, 2012. Now, authorities believe he took at least a dozen lives. Born in Utah in 1978, Israel Keyes grew up in what most people would consider extreme conditions. One of 10 kids in a super religious family, they eventually moved to Washington State, where they lived without electricity or running water.
Very loner-ish, standoffish. It's hard to explain how he made me feel, but I felt unsafe being near him.
But unlike many serial killers who had obviously troubled childhoods, Keyes somehow managed to turn this unusual upbringing into a training ground for his future crimes. During interrogations after his capture, Keyes explained how his isolated childhood helped him develop the skills he'd later use for murder, like learning to be quiet and patient when hunting for animals.
One specific conversation about killing a deer, he said that the initial shot didn't kill it, and so when he arrived, he started to gut the thing while it was alive.
Yeah, that's not normal. In fact, it's cruel and evil. And by the time Israel was a teenager, most other kids stayed away from him.
I've known since I was 14 that there were things that I thought were normal and that were okay that nobody else seems to think are normal and okay.
Israel Keyes joined the U.S. Army in 1998 at the age of 20. In the military, Keyes wasn't just getting by, he was actually crushing it. He served at multiple bases, including Fort Lewis and Fort Hood, and even did a tour in Egypt. But even while he was this model soldier during the week, his dark side was showing up in other ways. He'd spend his weekends getting completely wasted, and he was obsessed with Insane Clown Posse, a rap group known for their violent lyrics. When he got out of the military with an honorable discharge in 2001, things changed in a major way. Keyes became a dad. Later, when he was caught, he told investigators that having a daughter shifted something in his mind. Not enough to stop him from killing, but enough to create one rule: no harming kids. He wanted to keep his murder life totally separate from his family life. But if you think this is somehow honorable, think again. Keyes admitted that his first murder happened in 2001 in Bay, Washington. Yeah, that's the same year he had his daughter. But here's the thing, to this day, nobody knows who that victim was. He eventually told investigators he'd killed 4 people total while living in Washington, mentioning 2 murders around 2005 or 2006, but he kept the details super vague. It's like he was playing a sick game, giving just enough information to prove he did it, but not enough to help find the victims.
I think it's over some time that, on the ball when you got out of the military. Kill somebody and that's a different feeling that you do something.
This was the period when Keyes really figured out how to live two completely different lives. To everyone around him, he was just a normal dad trying to make it in the community. Behind that mask, though, he was feeding his growing need to hunt and kill people. In 2007, Keyes started fresh in Anchorage, Alaska, moving there with a girlfriend he met online. He started his own business, Keyes Construction, and worked hard to build a solid reputation. On the surface, everything looked perfect. He was running a successful company, being a good father, and seemed just like any other hardworking guy in the community.
That's where I got my kicks, I guess, was being able to live two different lives and have no one have a clue.
But underneath all that normal stuff, something way more sinister was happening. While he was doing construction jobs and raising his kid, Keyes was secretly studying other serial killers, especially Ted Bundy. But he wasn't just fanboying, he was learning from their mistakes, figuring out how to be better and not get caught. That's when he came up with maybe his most terrifying idea: creating kill kits, basically murder supply packages that he'd bury in different places across the country. While his clients were trusting him to build their decks and fix their roofs, he was literally mapping out future murder sites. What made Keyes different from other killers was his incredible ability to plan and wait. During one interview, he actually got excited explaining his method.
And I have the whole thing planned out. I have everything I need to do it.
His kill kits showed just how patient and methodical he was. He even included money in case he needed to make a quick getaway. The way Keyes picked his victims was equally calculated. Unlike killers who targeted specific types of people, Keyes chose locations first.
Why did you pick these folks?
I didn't. It was just random.
In one chilling interview, he explained, "I would look for places that had accessibility, but also privacy. Places where people felt safe, but were vulnerable." He'd spend days just watching an area, learning patterns, and laughing at the people foolish enough to fall into his trap.
People never expect stuff to happen.
When talking about how he maintained his double life, Keyes would sometimes laugh like he was sharing an inside joke. After getting caught, Keyes really enjoyed telling investigators about murdering people and bragged about his methods as if he was the smartest killer alive. Zero remorse, zero guilt, just straight up pride about what he did. This is textbook psychopath behavior. He was living for the attention and loved playing mind games with investigators by only giving them some details.
We'll get the whole story eventually.
He still wanted to be in control of the situation, even when he knew a life sentence awaited.
I mean, come on, let's face it. Yeah, what happened yesterday? I'm a bad guy. I tried to escape, but let's be honest. Nobody really thought I was a good guy before that, so it's not like being escaping suddenly makes me untrustworthy. I was kind of untrustworthy before that, so.
A psychopathic brain is wired completely different when it comes to emotions and morals. We're talking about someone who cannot feel empathy or guilt and is really good at manipulating people and faking normal emotions. Psychopaths often get bored easily and need constant excitement. And since they can't feel guilt or care for others, breaking rules and hurting people often gets them excited like nothing else. The big difference between psychopaths and other dangerous people is that psychopaths are usually smart enough to blend in. They can have good jobs, relationships, and seem totally normal, but it's all fake. Keyes was literally the perfect example. Construction business owner by day, serial killer by night. This is next level psychological stuff that scientists think most people are born with, not something that happens because of trauma.
He was talking about the murder of this girl like someone else would discuss what they had for lunch.
During his interrogation, Israel Keyes asked for something weird: the promise of a death penalty in exchange for names and body locations.
I can't be satisfied sitting in prison for all my life. I'd rather go out while I still have some sanity, good memories.
The prosecutor explained that it works the other way around. The more names he gave, the more likely it would be that he would be sentenced to death. Eventually, they reached an agreement, and Keyes revealed two names. Couple Bill and Lorraine courier. But it was another one of his moves. He'd buried the bodies inside their own home, and the house had since been demolished, so their bodies would never be recovered. During psychological evaluations in custody, experts found something unusual. Most serial killers show obvious signs of mental illness or have troubled backgrounds that explain their behavior. Keyes did not fit that pattern. One evaluator wrote, "He displays an almost unprecedented level of compartmentalization. He is not delusional or out of touch with reality. He is completely aware of what he is doing and chooses to do it anyway." The interrogation tapes show how this compartmentalization worked. In one moment, Keyes would be joking with investigators about wanting coffee and snacks.
Can you give me like an hour on the internet, maybe?
His planning was so detailed, it shocked even experienced FBI agents. During one interview, he described how he'd rent cars in one state, drive to another, and commit crimes far from home.
I think he wanted to tell the story. He wanted to talk about what he did.
After all, how else would he get the recognition now?
He enjoyed the thrill of it.
He also enjoyed making the detectives sick. Keyes knew they were playing along with him because they wanted information from him. So he gave them gory details to test their ability to hide their disgust. Detective Frank Russo, who interrogated him, remembers, he had drilled a hole and went ice fishing in the lake, and he had tied it up with baling wire and weights, and he had placed parts of her body down the lake as he fished. And I remember asking him, "Did you catch any fish?" And he said, "Yeah, I caught fish." And I said, "Well, what did you do with the fish?" And he said, "Well, I took them home and ate them." And for me, that just turned my stomach. The psychological evaluations revealed something else that screamed psychopathy. Israel Keyes loved the thrill of a double life and loved every second of his serial killer life. Not just the times when he would catch a victim, but the planning and the waiting too.
Back when I was smart, I would let them come to me.
He said, "Sometimes I'd spend more time planning than actually doing. It was like a hobby, something to think about during the boring parts of normal life." Experts who studied the interrogation tapes noted how Keyes would become physically animated when describing his crimes. His body language would change, he'd sit forward in his chair, and his voice would take on a different tone. It was like watching someone talk about their passion project. The psychological profile developed during his time in custody described him as a mixed typology killer, someone who showed traits of both organized and disorganized offenders. He was methodical in his planning, but could be impulsive in the moment. And the toying with the authorities continued from behind bars too. For starters, there were these drawings. Israel used his own blood to draw them. Under one skull, he wrote, "We are one." The others just feature upside down crosses, perhaps a quick ode to Satan. It's 12 drawings, so some detectives believe this is the total number of victims, but we'll never learn this as Keyes had one last trick up his sleeve when it came to taking control of the narrative.
You really think I'm gonna feel like when you need more information?
Serial killer Israel Keyes was found dead at the Anchorage Correctional Complex.
We received a call early in the morning that on December 1st, 2012, Israel Keyes had committed suicide in his jail cell.
His self-removal in custody was, like everything else he did, carefully planned. Even in death, he maintained control over his narrative, taking many secrets to his grave. The drawings found in his cell suggest there were more victims than he admitted to, but the true number may never be known. The case of Israel Keyes changed how law enforcement looks at serial killers. Keyes showed authorities around the world that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who look completely normal, the ones who blend in. It's a scary thought. Perhaps the worst ones out there are the ones we haven't heard of. They could be living down our streets, or worse, under our roofs. I can only wonder how Israel's girlfriend and daughter felt when they found out who he really was. For investigators, the most frustrating aspect was how close Keyes came to never being caught at all. If he hadn't broken his own rules by killing Samantha Koenig in his hometown, he might have continued his crimes indefinitely. Keyes died over a decade ago, but his case is far from over. Detectives across the US are trying to track down his kill kits and victims to bring closure to their families.
Given the way he looked at it and he started shaking a little bit, I would say she is definitely one of his victims.
Deborah Feldman is a woman who went missing from New Jersey. It was in 2009. Her body has never been recovered.
It seems like a needle in a haystack type of situation. There are thousands of missing persons cases in the US, and the older they are, the harder it is to find the body. Israel Keyes never apologized for his crimes. In fact, he bragged about his unique methods, complimenting his own intelligence and saying his only regret was getting caught. And he joked about almost feeling guilty about the US authorities spending so much money trying to locate his victims.
I almost feel guilty. Costing the taxpayers a lot of money to find us.
What makes Israel Keyes one of the most terrifying killers in history isn't just the number of people he took away from this world. It's how he did it and who he was when he wasn't killing. Most serial killers have some kind of pattern or specific type of victim, but Keyes killed completely at random. For 14 years, he lived a totally normal life while planning and committing murders across the country. His own girlfriend and daughter had no idea they were living with a monster. He'd help his daughter with homework, ran a successful business, and was the nice guy next door. Then would fly across the country, dig up one of his pre-buried kill kits, strangers, and come home to make breakfast like nothing happened. He wasn't killing because of trauma. He chose to do these things because he enjoyed it. That kind of cold, calculated evil, hidden behind such a convincing mask of normalcy, is the scariest kind of predator, the one you'd never see coming. Thanks for watching, you guys. Be sure to like and subscribe, and let me know in a comment what other terrifying serial killers you know of. See you soon, and stay safe.